For the first time that I can recall, we have an administration that sees manufacturing, making things here, as central to America's future, and speaks clearly about the positive role for workers and their unions in the future. See, President Obama has laid out an aggressive agenda for structural change and has appointed people like Secretary of Labor Hilda Solis who believe in that vision. Of course, President Obama inherited a terrible mess from his predecessor. A journey of stolen elections, ruinous tax cuts for the rich, dishonest wars, financial scandal, government-sponsored torture, flooded cities, and finally economic collapse. President Obama's administration began out of necessity and vision with an act of political courage, the enactment of a broad and substantial economic recovery program. Despite Republican opposition, the stimulus was big enough to make real positive impact on our economy, saving or creating more than 1 million jobs already. But the job crisis has escalated. The foreclosure crisis continues, and Wall Street appears to have returned to its old ways. By the way, this is bonus week on Wall Street, and I urge you to watch how much discipline they show with all the nation watching this week. Watch and be amazed. See, now more than ever, we need the boldness and the clarity that we saw in our president during the campaign in 2008 when he outlined the scope of the economic problems facing our nation unencumbered by the political crosscurrents weighing us down today. 1 year into the Obama administration and 1 year into a Congress with strong Democratic majorities, we need leadership action that matches the urgency that is felt so deeply by working people in this country. See, too often, Washington falls into the grip of ambivalence about the fundamental purpose of government. Is it to protect wealthy elites and gently encourage them to be more charitable? Or is it to look after the vast majority of the American people? Government, in the interest of the vast majority of Americans, has produced our greatest achievements: the New Deal, the Great Society, the Civil Rights Movement, Social Security, Medicare, the minimum wage, the 40-hour week, the Civil Rights Act, and the Voting Rights Act. That's what made the United States a beacon of hope in a confused and divided world. But too many people now take for granted government's role as protector of Wall Street and the privileged. They see middle-class Americans as overpaid and underworked. They see Social Security as a problem rather than the only piece of our retirement system that actually works. They feel sorry for homeless people, but fail to see the connections between downsizing and outsourcing and inequality and homelessness. This worldview has brought Democrats nothing but disaster. The Republicans' response is to offer middle class the false hope of tax cuts. Tax cuts end up enriching the rich, devastating the middle class by destroying the institutions like public education and Social Security that make the middle class possible. Are you trying to tell me something?
We are now into our Q&A period, so...
Well, I'm not done with what I have to say.
Well...
And you invited me here to say.
25 minutes, so we're going to start with the Q&A.
I'm going to continue with my speech.
Can you wrap up in 30 seconds?
No, I can wrap up in a couple of minutes, but not 30 seconds.
Well,
look, working people have been waiting 30 years to talk. We're going to talk.
All these questions for
Good.
you. All right, you're almost done?
Yeah, I am.
All right.
Thanks. Not a problem. Because here's what I have to say. No matter what I say or do, the reality is that when unemployment's 10% and rising, working people will not stand for tokenism, will not vote for politicians who think that they can push a few crumbs our way and then continue the failed economic policies of the last 30 years. I'll be even blunter. In 1992, workers voted for Democrats who promised action on the job, who talked about reining in corporate greed, and who promised health care reform. Instead, we got NAFTA and emboldened Wall Street and not much more. We swallowed our disappointment and we worked to preserve a Democratic majority in 1994 because we knew what the alternative was. But there was no way to persuade enough working Americans to go to the polls when they couldn't tell the difference between the policies of the two parties. So politicians who think that working people have it too good, too much health care, too much Social Security, too much Medicare, too much power on the job, are actually inviting a repeat of 1994. And our country can't stand that repeat. President Obama said in his inaugural address that the state of the economy calls for action, bold and swift, and we will act, not only to create new jobs, but to lay a new foundation for growth. And now is the time to make good on those words, for Congress, for President Obama, and for the American people. We have some ideas of what those people can do on the weekends if they don't believe us. They can go sit with the unemployed. They can talk to college students looking at tuition hikes and laid off professors and no jobs at graduation. They can talk to workers whose jobs are being offshored. They can ask what these Americans think about their future. Ask them what they think of Wall Street, of health insurance companies, and of big banks. Ask them if they want a government that sits in partnership with those folks or a government that stands up for working people. Then think about the great promise of America and the great legacy that we've inherited. Our wealth as a nation and our energy as a people can secure for us and our children, in the words of my predecessor, Samuel Gompers, more schoolhouses and less jails, more books and less arsenals, more learning and less voice, more leisure and less greed, more justice and less revenge. In fact, more of the opportunities to cultivate our better natures. That's the America that we look forward to, and we're looking forward to getting it now. Thank you. Sorry about that.
All right. We're going to get started. We only have 20 minutes for questions. I ask that you please be seated. Thank you. The AP is reporting today that the initial stimulus bill had virtually no effect on employment and that it was especially ineffective in the construction industry. Why should there be another stimulus if this was the result of the first?
Good question. Let's go back and talk a little bit about history first. When the first stimulus was being thought about, nobody thought the economy was going to be in as deep a recession as it turned out to be. And back then they said we would need at least $1.3 trillion to turn the economy around. Remember that? Well, the Republicans stood up and defied and fought against every last piece of the stimulus bill, so we were able to get a bill that was about 2/3 of what was needed. Nonetheless, our figures indicate, and most economists' figures indicate, that we are saving some jobs, but we need a second stimulus package. A second stimulus package along the lines that we have lined out, the 5 points that the AFL-CIO lined out, will create many jobs. Elsewise, we stand the danger of a double-dip recession going back into that recession because the states are not spending, workers are not spending, and if we don't do something to create jobs and create spending, the recovery that is taking over a little bit of the financial economy, but not the real economy, will take over.
Okay, so you just mentioned the 5-point plan to stem unemployment that I think you introduced in November. Your proposals included using TARP money to offer commercial rate loans to small and medium-sized businesses. Which points of your plan have come to pass? Which haven't? Why did you propose the plan? And what will you, when you meet Mr. Obama today, tell him about this plan?
First of all, today's meeting isn't about the economy. Some of the portions of the plan have already been enacted. The extending of unemployment benefits, health care benefits, and COBRA benefits were extended. We suggested a 12-month extension. The House agreed with that. The Senate gave a 2-month extension, so we'll come back and visit that.